Hello, everybody. My name is Ronald. I'm the co-founder of About Fraud. We are a global fraud fighter community, and we're going to host this webinar today. Before we're going into all the details and talking about our speakers, I would like to address one housekeeping rule. Please ask questions. On the right-hand side, you can see a chat box where you can type in your question. We're trying to see your question and providing some good feedback on this, maybe straight away during our discussion or at the end of the presentation. So please ask any kind of questions. Please enter your comments. I think that's the only housekeeping rule which we should follow here. Otherwise, let's kick this off. Today, we're going to talk about false positives, which potentially killing a lot of our revenue. And we have two great experts in our discussion today who can give a lot of insights, best practices, advices, how to approach and tackle this topic. Okay, then I would like to give the word to Jack to do a short intro about himself, and then we're going to Kevin. Jack, the stage is yours.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you. My name is Jack Spiro. It's great to be here today. My history, my background, the first part of my career was really as an engineer, and the second half of my career now has been in product management. I've been working on fingerprinting and device identification technologies since 2013, 2012. And recently, over the last year, I've joined Fingerprint as the director of product here and head of product. I'm happy to talk to you about fingerprinting capabilities, device identification capabilities, and how it can help solve this problem that we're here to talk about today.
Thank you for joining, Jack. Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Siegel. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I have over, 25 years now experience in data science, machine learning, AI, advanced analytics, and I've spanned a number of industries, including financial services, where I worked at Visa, and retail, where I worked at Macy's. My experience in financial services and Visa, I built out their data science teams, and I worked on their fraud and risk problems and build out their predictive solutions and products. I'm currently at Vesta, where I lead the operations approval operations team, and I'm responsible for the development, the deployment, the optimization, and of the decisioning and fraud scoring for the models there. We use many advanced analytics and machine learning techniques, and I'm proud to say that we built best-in-class fraud mitigation and approval products, and hopefully I'll be able to share with you some of my insights from that process. Just a little bit on a personal note, I'm an avid runner, and I've been fortunate to complete a number of long-distance races, including the New York Marathon. And why this is important is that I find running is a good way to clear my head, and that's how I get through a lot of my technical problems. So anyway, I'm excited to be here and look forward to some great questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin, for being here. And we're always grateful to have great people in our panel. And with this background, we hope to provide a lot of good insights for our audience. On the right-hand side, everybody can see 4 bullet points or 4 topics, which we're trying to cover as best as possible. But again, ask questions if you want to learn more about specific topics or maybe areas which we don't cover in our agenda here. Okay, but let's kick this off to really understand what are actually false positives or false declines, or is it the same, is it not the same? And I think that's a good point to build a common foundation to really have a good understanding about what we're actually talking about. And I think, Kevin, maybe that's a good topic for you to kick this off.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And so I guess the question I have is, what do we mean when we say false positives? I was thinking about this question before, and I think we're all familiar with this term in some way because of the pandemic, but I still think it's worth reviewing. And if you think about the pandemic, a false positive, let's say it's a test result that incorrectly indicates that a particular condition, like a test or something, is true. For example, in the pandemic, we had COVID tests, right? We had those little sticks. And if you took a COVID test and it said you had COVID, but you did a more advanced test and found out it wasn't, you didn't have COVID, then that would be an example of a false positive. So in the context of e-commerce and fraud prevention, we typically use the term false positive to indicate a user or say a visitor to a website that is incorrectly identified as fraudulent or they're having some sort of fraudulent activity. And because of that, that person is then stopped from continuing with their purchase, or they're required many times to provide additional information, further authentication in order to continue. So having talked about false positive, I think it's also worth mentioning the flip side of that, and that's a false negative. And that's defined as a fraudulent, that would be defined as when a fraudulent user goes undetected, in the fraud system. And so they're able to continue and they make their purchase. And then this, can turn into future chargebacks and fraud losses. So any decisioning system that is not 100% accurate, and that by that I mean perfect, which is impossible, is going to have some balance of false positive and false negatives. And both of these outcomes, as we'll be talking about, have a cost to your business. In fact, when one increases, the other generally decreases. For example, the more aggressive you may be in stopping the fraud, the lower your false negatives, you're stopping the fraud, but the higher your false positives and you're hurting your current customers. So in the end, a balance needs to be struck, okay? So what is the difference then between false positive and false decline? From my perspective, frankly, it's not much, and it's more of a industry context. From an industry perspective, I view false declines are type of false positive that it refers to the actual decision, that you're making the decision. For example, an attempted card payment that was declined. In fact, all false positives, all false declines are false positives. So it makes sense that false declines are particularly costly, and as this type of false positive may prevent your real customers from actually making a purchase, meaning that as a merchant you're losing revenue from the inaccuracy of your decisioning.
And I also think in the next slide, we actually have some numbers, because I think that's an important point to give you some perspective, because when we talk about fraud prevention, everybody has certain numbers in mind. How much money do I lose actually by fraud, by chargebacks or similar topics? But I think not many companies talk about how much money do I actually lose by false positives. And as we can see, just highlighted these two numbers, it's not a big difference. So we're losing potentially 5% on fraud, but also we're losing potentially 3% on false positive. And Kevin will go into more details now, but I think that's an important aspect which not everybody keeps really in mind, because how many people are actually working on the fraud team to stop fraud, and how many people are actually working or looking into the details how to identify and how to minimize false positives.
Yeah, so absolutely right. So as we look at these false declines and the impact, I've seen some numbers before that many merchants believe that the cost of fraud is actually more significant than the loss of revenue due to the misidentification or the declines. But is this true, and how does this cost of the false declines really stack up against the cost of fraud? And so this is an interesting conundrum for businesses and how to deal with it. In some 2020 reports, we found that companies lose roughly 5% of their revenue to fraud each year, and this is includes it's encompassing, includes inventory loss, the chargeback related expenses, back office expenses, operational costs, and as well as some of the false declines. So in particular, false declines can actually be the largest source of revenue loss, roughly 3% of sale. And this loss, if you look at the graph, we broke it out by types of vertical, digital goods, physical goods, and or hybrid. And in particular, so this loss can be higher for digital and hybrid merchants than physical. And I believe that that's because there may be an opportunity to reverse decisions before merchandise is shipped. For example, have some sort of pending status, get some more authentication. E-commerce companies in particular need to be thinking about the accuracy of these fraud prevention solutions. If the decision models are too strict, for example, you're actually losing more revenue from the false declines than you are from the actual fraud and the losses that you're taking. And the other side of this is there's other softer losses, which is such as customer impact. So, bad decisioning can have a direct impact on your customer lifetime value.
I would like to take one question from Peter and adding another question from my side. So Peter's asking, what is actually a good or the best in class for false decline rate? What you mentioned, Kevin, in the beginning. But I think the other aspect is also, maybe you can give an advice, Kevin, what is actually a good way to approach to understanding your false positive rate? Because that's sometimes not easy to understand, is it really false positives or is it actually a good decline? Maybe you can give some perspective how company could really look about this to really identify internally where I am right now. Is my false positive 2%, 5%, 3%, or how do I actually get to this number?
It's a great question, and it's actually something that, as a data scientist looking at the model performance, I have to deal with all the time. So the easy way, one way is a little more subjective, is when you're getting feedback from your customers too. So when you make a bad decision, it's very likely that you're going to hear about it. So the other side of it though is a lot of times you really don't know if your decision was correct until later on in time too. Chargebacks and fraud trickle in over time. So from a statistical perspective, within our environment, we do like holdout samples, holdout groups, or control groups, as we call them, so that we can actually look at how the decisioning is working in comparison to if it was not working. So that is one way, and it's not, and I admit that's not something that certainly everyone can do. But it is something that we can make use of at some points, just to make sure. The other side of it is having multiple strategies such that you can do, and you can switch between, so you kind of do testing of different strategies to see which one is catching more or which one is having less, for example, less complaints from your customers.
Thank you, Kevin, for approaching this topic, because a lot of people know it's not easy to really define this number. And for a lot of merchants, that's still like a struggle to identify this. Yeah? Thank you for getting perspective. Good. Yeah, then let's go to the next topics.
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. So I think one of the things that we like to talk about here at this point is the idea of device identification, and can device identification as a potential solution or one of many solutions help impact this problem that Kevin's laid out positively. So can we make any progress against it? And one of the things we'd like to bring up is that device identification can do quite a bit. It can really help with making a map of what devices users are actually leveraging. It can help identify maybe multiple users or a single user using multiple user accounts. So maybe multiple email addresses, maybe folks that have refreshed or cleared their browser history or their cookies. Maybe they've gone in incognito mode. These are all hard things to track. And one of the things that we do here at Fingerprint, and we try to do in our product, is create the highest accuracy possible when it comes to device identification, so that we can feed that data and that signal really into other products like Vesta, as an example, and the work that Kevin does over with his set of data scientists, in order to really increase the fidelity and increase the resolution of what's happening in order to more accurately identify individuals, and then therefore reduce false declines, right? Because you'll be able to have better identification. And so I think one question we'd like to ask, maybe coming up here on the next slide, is actually a poll to ask how many people today in the audience that are attending this webinar actually use either browser fingerprinting or potentially some kind of device identification product or technology as part of their solution to really fight against fraud, and especially when it comes to payment fraud, reduce the amount of false declines that they see today.
So just for the audience, the poll is open. So you should have the option to choose A, yes, you have such a solution in place today. B, no. And number C is you're just not sure. So please take a moment to select your answer. Yeah. But as we can see, 86% right now are with A. So they have something in place, which is already good. And 5% no, and 9% right now saying not sure. It's a bit moving back and forward, but I think we have a clear winner here, that the majority of the audience actually is using a fingerprint or something similar to really move the needle, as Jack just mentioned. Jack, is this a big surprise to you, this result?
I think in some ways it's a little bit of a surprise, but in some ways it's not. I think as we jump into maybe the next topic, we can go through the layers of the technology when it comes to at least Fingerprint's approach to device identification. And what we end up finding from a lot of customers is either they're using some kind of open source library for fingerprinting. Right, and we actually at Fingerprint, we actually have an open source library, and we actually contribute to it, and we encourage others to leverage it as part of their identity solution. But that only gets you so much accuracy. And so what we've done here at Fingerprint is not only do we take a couple different interesting, I like to call them raw signals from the browser, and we process them into that smart signal, which is that visitor ID or that unique identifier that we provide as a paid product as well. But we leverage actually multiple different types of techniques in order to really increase the accuracy of our product. And what do I mean by that? I mean that we actually use our own open source fingerprinting library, but then we actually have other methodologies. We have some data science methodologies that we leverage both from a machine learning standpoint. We use an algorithmic approach. There are some trade house secrets that we use, and we take a look and weight many of these raw signal values that you see on the screen here in order to process that data and come up with a very high quality visitor ID. One of the things that we see, and so maybe this explains the poll results, is that a lot of folks that we talk to, a lot of our customers actually already have some solution in place today, even if that solution is as simple as leveraging, say, local storage in a browser, local state, or if that's, say, using cookies or some kind of other methodology. But what we tend to find is when you're really looking for these cases of fraud, we tend to find that many times bad actors are sophisticated enough. Even the maybe the least sophisticated bad actors maybe know how to open up an incognito tab, or maybe they know how to clear their cookies, or maybe they know how to clear their local storage state, right? And so that's where we find these other methodologies that Fingerprint brings to the table to leverage something that's beyond cookies, something that's beyond local storage as a solution to really get to this high identity accuracy, so we can overcome easy things like incognito mode, and actually even some other more complicated things that we see bad actors do, such as, say, device spoofing or browser spoofing as well. And so we actually take a multi-layered approach. Even though I know our name is Fingerprint, right, and our product, right, is Fingerprint, we actually only use fingerprinting as one of those layers, right, in order to create a high-quality device visitor ID or identifier. And we really believe that it's important if you're looking to catch, fraud over any length of time, that having a higher quality device identification beyond just cookies or beyond just local storage is important to catch those really bad actors that can easily use incognito mode, or again, maybe change their user agent in their browser. So again, I think for us, we really see this idea of having a multi-layered approach to identity to be important, just as you might have a multi-layered approach to your security solutions in general against fraud. And the last thing that we bring to the table, I think, is maybe the ability to then link these together so that once you are really great at identifying, you have a high degree of accuracy at identifying a device, even if that device is being used by multiple, say, user accounts, you can then start to link this information together to say, this device is using these user accounts, or these user accounts are using these devices, and you can start to build a lot more intelligence out. And so hopefully that's one of the things that, as you know, as a product, we try to provide as a high quality signal to others like Vesta and Kevin. We try to provide this high quality signal that they use as one of many signals in order to fight fraud. Moving on to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about what we mean by accuracy and stability. When we think about accuracy, I usually talk about this idea of drift. And usually that's kind of the term that I would use. And what we mean by that is it's easy many times to identify a device on a particular day for the first time that you've seen it, but it may be harder to do so actually over time, right? And so if that device has settings on it that change, if the attributes of that device change, if say someone else is logged into that device and using it, not the original user, all of these things are things that might change over time. And as time changes, the accuracy actually becomes lower and lower and lower. So if you have a bad actor that visits, say, your product or your site, and you identify them as a fraudulent user and you mark them down as such, one of the things that you probably will want is a high degree of accuracy. So that if that person comes back to your product, if that bad actor arrives again or tries to make a payment or does something nefarious, maybe is trying to launder money or use a stolen credit card, you're able to identify them, say, a month later or 90 days later or 120 days later, right, when that individual comes back. So we really believe that accuracy is very important in order to make sure that when you do identify fraud, there is a way to ensure that you're identifying that person again 90 days later or 120 days later. The second bit here is when it comes to false declines, the problem set is really the same. So just as we want to remember accurately the individual who is maybe, say, a bad actor, when it comes to false declines, we want to make sure we remember those that were not bad actors, right? That were good, right? That actually are using the system and are good customers. And so in that sense, you need accuracy for both sides of that coin, but both to identify bad actors and both to make sure that you're reducing your false declines by having a high degree of accuracy, so you don't mistake good actors for bad actors. Again, kind of the same problem, different side of the same coin.
I have a short question, Jack. I mean, you have seen in the audience, a lot of people have already experienced with a kind of a device fingerprint or something similar. I mean, also you have been around for a long time in this area. Do you see any kind of trend or any kind of big movements with this kind of technology? Because again, maybe some people think, I'm using device fingerprints since a long time, and I master this topic and I know how it works. I mean, you as the expert, do you see any kind of shifts or trends or kind of big steps, how technology is moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a couple of things. One, we've already seen, right, that there's been a bunch of movement from companies like Apple, Google, both in the device landscape. So at this point, I'm talking about iOS, I'm talking about Android, but then also in the browser space as well. These large companies, right, that are developing and running either browsers or the operating systems for your mobile devices have been making significant changes to the way in which they allow you to track both good and bad actors, right, that are leveraging your product. So both on the mobile side, right, there's been a ton of changes recently with the industry, and we see more coming down the pipeline. From a mobile device standpoint, we believe that those changes are rapidly being deployed in the iOS App Store. And one of the things that we specialize in when it comes to working with our customers is making sure that we're providing a product that it meets the standards of Apple and Google, right? When you're developing an application for iOS and Android, and their changing landscape of what you can track and what privacy different privacy attributes that you can leverage. On the other side, we also see this happening in browsers as well, right? So not only are there many browsers changes that are taking place with new standards, but actually the way in which these standards place new restrictions on how you can use local storage and how you can use cookies are also happening, and it's been happening actually over the last 6 months. And we expect those restrictions to continue, and we expect browsers to get much more, I'd say, stringent on what the rule sets are for how you can leverage local storage and cookies for some of these problems. And so because of that, we really see a lot of folks leveraging open source solutions, and they think that they have enough accuracy to catch the fraud that's available. And we provide, again, an open source solution to get folks started. But as leaders in the space, what we see is that, especially with the changes that are coming to browsers constantly, I think every month there's almost a new browser update of some kind. And we have a whole team that's focused on trying to keep our product up to date so that we're constantly evolving with browser changes over time and browser updates over time. We tend to see, and I think we have the best solution out there in the industry on the open source side, that there's really only a 60% accuracy. And when I say that, we tend to see even our competitors use our open source solution because it's the best, highest accurate open source solution that's out there, but they can only get to 60% accuracy. It's really only by using some of these other things beyond fingerprinting that we do in-house that really makes it a full identification product, where we're doing other things like weighing the different values of these different browser attributes, where we're doing algorithmic approaches and using machine learning in order to get to that 99.5% accuracy over time, which is what you see on this chart here. And really, I think, in order to maintain that level of accuracy, that 99.5%, we find that it takes a lot of effort in-house from our researchers and our engineers to stay up to date on all the browser changes and all of the different, new regulations going into cookie use and those regulations in the future, both in a browser, but also on iOS and on Android. And lastly, I would say that when a lot of customers come to us after they've been using the open source 60% accurate solution, which again, I think is the best that you're going to find out there in terms of open source and what's available for free. Once they start doing a POC or run an implementation with us, they tend to see that they catch a lot more fraud because, again, if you have a bad actor that comes back 60 days, 90 days, or 120 days, you really want to make sure that you catch that person and stop them from, say, using a fraudulent credit card. In the same way, you want to make sure you're also identifying good actors, and so that you're not, executing false declines when you shouldn't, again, over those 60, 90, and 120 days.
Perfect, Jack. I think we got one question from Lucas, which fits perfect what you just mentioned. Maybe we can just take this one question before moving to the next slide.
Yeah, sure. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ron. I was going to say, it sounds like the question is, can you share how accurate the solution is for filtering genuine customers and avoiding false declines? The beauty about the product that we have here at Fingerprint and providing it as a high quality signal to Vesta and their platform is that that solution is going to be the same for any that accuracy is going to be the same for any user. So whether it's a good actor or a bad actor, we're providing a level of accuracy at 99.5%. And so again, that 99.5% accuracy would be applied to a bad actor as well as a good actor. So you could expect only 0.5% really, I think of wiggle room to be in that false decline area that I think Lucas asked about. So again, if we achieve that 99.5% accuracy, you're only looking at that 0.5%, I'd say, for false declines. But again, we're just one of many signals I think that Kevin and team use. So they're using us as one high quality signal for Vesta.
Now we got in a bunch of questions, but I think maybe, Jack, we need to maybe put this in perspective that the accuracy which you mentioned is really about detecting the device again, isn't it? Or do you mean also by this term that you can detect fraud or not? Maybe that's a good point to just make sure we have the same understanding about this KPI here.
Yeah, that's a great clarification. Absolutely. We are detecting a device. That device could either be a iOS or Android mobile device, or that device could be a browser. And so what we do is we provide a high quality, what we call a smart signal that is a unique visitor ID for each one of those devices. And a platform such as Kevin, right, and team and at Vesta, they take those identifiers and they actually join them together to create a profile of that user, so they can understand, if that user is using said device and what devices they're using. So they can map out a network of devices to users and build a profile on that person. And in that way, when they build that profile, they can get a better understanding of maybe what fingerprint does as a signal, as one of the many signals that Kevin and team uses to fight fraud. So again, when I talk about the 99.5% accuracy, I'm talking about identifying browsers and identifying devices, mobile devices, not necessarily fighting fraud, but you want the highest quality device identifier that you can get in order to create a good user profile in order to reduce false declines.
Perfect. I think that was important to just make sure everybody understands what it really means. But I think that's a good bridge to the next part, which we have prepared, because as Jack mentioned, the fingerprint which is provided, it's often one data point going into an engine or rule or something similar like Kevin has in place to enhance the data quality to make better decisions.
Yeah, and so on this next slide, we really talk about maybe the different options you have when you're going to leverage, say, some kind of device identification solution, such as the one that we provided, Fingerprint. We think your options here at General are either purchase a complete fraud solution, right, which is probably the easiest thing that you can do. In fact, many customers come to us, they say, I'm bought into the technology that you have. We're really impressed with the demos that you're able to provide to us. We really think that this has application, right, for many use cases, both in payment fraud, reducing false declines, but then also maybe other fraudulent use cases as well. But they'll come to us and then say, how do I use it? Like, how do I leverage it? How can I integrate it? And one of the things sometimes we'll do is actually point them at a provider who has a bigger platform with a rules engine, who is the ability to really have this signal as ingested and built in. And Vesta and Kevin and team are one of such solutions that exist, right? And so Kevin and Vesta and team actually leverage the Fingerprint product and really bring you a complete solution so that you don't have to integrate that yourself, so you don't have to build that yourself and really take on the complexity. Because again, we have customers that come to us and say, wow, we really are bought into the value and we're bought into the philosophy of what's going on here. We would like to leverage it. But the ability to do so is just too high. The cost is too high from an implementation standpoint. And in those cases, we point them to Kevin, we point them to Vesta and say, you should purchase this full-on platform solution that leverages us and is already built in. You can integrate an existing solution, but that still takes some savviness. Maybe if you have a platform today, you can do that. But what we really find is customers have the hardest time when they're building their own decision engine and they're really building this from scratch, which is the last and third option that we have on the slide here. We get a lot of customers coming to us asking for us for best practices, and the truth is that a full-on platform for fraud is a hard thing to build. It's actually not something that can be done easily unless you have the talent in-house, you have the prior knowledge, if you have the experience. And so that's why we really try to point customers in the direction of maybe going with a solution that already has a high quality device identifier built into it, like Vesta and Kevin's team do.
Kevin, do you have any comments to this topic? I think it's in general, it's a big topic, but as a consultant, I would say more and more companies not going to build something from scratch. I mean, maybe some historic companies who have a big infrastructure, growing the team over time, maybe they have something in-house which still works, but I haven't seen a lot of companies in maybe the last 2 or 3 years who are really building something from scratch. So that's my experience.
Yeah, that I concur with that. It's complex, and with the addition, and I'll talk a little bit about machine learning, techniques and the whole decision science on top of that. It can become, as you're trying to optimize your decision, you're leveraging more complex tools. So it's not impossible, but there is data that you have to have available. There is skill sets that you have to available, and there's a cost too, in actually not only building it but actually maintaining it over time too.
Maybe one comment on this is that's interesting because some providers have an open platform where you can actually build your own machine learning models. And I've seen merchants using this, but they struggled to use it because they felt like I need it, but it's not just a plug and play. There's a lot of energy and effort which goes into getting started and maintaining this. So that's why it's an important decision to really selecting the right infrastructure, also with your skill set, your resources which you have, and the kind of effort which you want to invest in this topic. Huh?
Definitely, and I definitely agree with that. One of the things where Jack talked about, their free offering versus their paid for. We've looked at both actually, and there is a difference. And I look for fidelity in the signals that I'm getting, meaning that not only accuracy, but it has to be stable over time, right? And that is exactly what I look for. If something's highly accurate but it's not stable, it's not as useful. So because I'm building on top of that, right? So I have to have a firm foundation to build on.
Maybe the last point to this, so there was a question from Robert regarding merchant data. I think that is one of the biggest advantages of having any kind of third party, because in many cases they have consortium data, which normally don't have yourself. So if you're building something from scratch, you see your own data, but you're missing out the rest of the universe of data. And that is also, I guess, in your case, Jack, one of the big advantages that you see a lot of devices around the world, and you can provide a lot of insights to this one specific merchant, which otherwise you would never gain without your insights.
Yeah, absolutely. And this might actually even be tied into the question above, which is how do you determine the 99.5% accuracy of our Pro product versus the other product too? We see so much data, right? We see so much data from all this usage. And one of the things that gives us is the ability to statistically see anomalies and identify them and see them at scale. And actually what we do is we actually run our Pro product and we run it against our open source product. We actually run both at the same time. And that's how we know the difference in accuracy between the 99.5% of the paid product versus the 60% accuracy of our open source product. And as we do that, not only can we figure that out, but we can also start to do things like understand that when these sets of signals or these sets of attributes are combined together, this is actually a warning profile. And we should identify you and tell you that these particular sets, when we see them in the wild, they tend to be higher risk, right? So as an example, that's how we can identify some things like spoofing. As someone is actually spoofing their browser or their device, some of these attributes will not match. We can also say, we tend to see these visitor IDs marked as fraudulent just because they share these types of attributes on an ongoing basis. And so that's one of the things that we can actually alert folks about, because we have this wealth of data to draw upon.
Perfect. So let's go to the next question that which we have prepared. The next slides, we get some more questions coming in, but we're trying to capture them at the end.
So let me try to take this to the next logical step where we're going, is kind of bringing everything together, right? We've talked a little about the complexity, but to combat fraud, we still see some merchants out there that are just enforcing their decisions with very strict rules, and this results in getting a lot of declines and for people, good customers who really want to be there and fully intend to pay. So how do we make the better decisions? Well, I'm going to introduce the term. I use the term I refer to as decision science. And so what I mean by that is decision science is the systematic use, and it's a definition, of data, advanced analytics, and behavioral knowledge, to optimize the decisioning. So to put it in layman's term, I'm bringing all the signals together that I can, and the best of the machine learning, the best of the fingerprinting, the best of any other sort of behavioral information I have together, and building a decisioning model on top of that is able to interpret the risk and provide you a statistically stronger decision-making ability. So how do we utilize, and we mentioned, Jack mentioned a little bit about his worldview, consortium view. I'm a big advocate of consortium data. So we utilize, all the client data we see, our consortium view, and we use the external data, for example, like the device identification that we get from Jack's product, along with our sophisticated analytics and machine learning. I think we also bring that together, and I know Jack mentioned a little bit about looking at he was implying cluster. We do linkage analysis where we're trying to understand different sorts of identities or identity sorts of information and how they cluster together, be it a good customer and also bad actors out there. And we use optimization techniques to tackle both the false positives and the false negatives. And so we are all about extracting the signals, both the fraud and what I call the non-fraud, from our data and integrating them into a single decisioning package. So I'll pause here. I think we have a poll. Is that correct, Ronald?
Yeah, no, that's correct. Let's go one step here, so we can see the poll. So how many of you are really still using or only using rules today? And how many of you are using more advanced decision techniques? The poll is open, and you can see we have 5 possible answers, because maybe some of you have rules and using advanced decision techniques like AI or ML. Maybe some of you outsourced the decision completely to a third party, so you're not touching the transaction at all. Or maybe again, you're not sure, and then please select number E. And I also just want to bring up one example. I worked for a big fashion luxury goods company, and they have sometimes a challenge that a lot of high-risk signals actually ending up being the best customers. And I think that's something important when we're looking about data. It very depends on what is your business model, what is the product which you're selling, what is the margin behind to really make the right decision. So in this case, which I just mentioned, is like you're selling a luxury handbag for a few $1,000s, and the shipping address maybe is somewhere in the south of France. The IP is in Switzerland, and the credit card is from the Far East in Russia, for example. It looks really off, looks really risky, but potentially this is one of your best customers which you have. But looking just at data and making black and white decisions, like with many rules in the past, that would end up in a really bad false positive, because one of your good customers just shows this kind of behavior. And again, it's one example, it's one specific use case, but I think it's important really looking into your business and really making the right setup for your needs. I'm just closing the poll right now, and we can actually see that 52% using a hybrid with rules and advanced, let's say, techniques. Then we have 17% only using rules. We have 9% using AI ML, We also have 9% not sure, and we have 13% outsourced this to a third party. So the winner is the hybrid, while you have a bit of a mix of everything. Any surprises, Kevin, from your side, or is like the hybrid kind of most used setup nowadays?
Yeah, it's not surprising, because I think I'm actually an advocate of not throwing away a good tool. Certainly, going all the way rules is not productive for some of the reasons you talked about in your experience. But going all the way to only doing machine learning too, sometimes you can miss out on your ability to react to changes. Rules can provide ability to shut down certain openings very quickly. Now, I use those to provide broader guardrails. So if that's what I mean when I talk about hybrid, and I use a layered approach. So, but yeah, it's not surprising. I think that is where the industry is going, and it's being only rule based is something probably people should probably be taking a better look at, because they're probably missing a lot of revenue opportunities.
Yeah, and that fits to our topic, how to make more revenue and minimizing your false declines. And again, in the past, a lot of people really had black and white rules. If the IP is like too far away from the shipping address, order address, decline, or if the shipping address and billing address did not match, etc. So really black and white rules. I hope the audience is far away in applying these rules today. And I think the industry has become more advanced and not doing this. But yeah, I mean, at the end, everything is ending up in hopefully more revenue for your business. So let's go to the next slide, Kevin.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Vesta and what we're doing. So and we talked about the hybrid, and I'll say that I'm a big advocate. And another way I look at that is we are really trying to strike a balance between maximizing revenue and also maintaining safety. So that's what we're doing with our customers as we implement what I call, as I define as our decision science models themselves. And so, as we've touched previously, many of the solutions out there prevent fraud by automatically declining or canceling transactions, and this can not only frustrate your good customers, but you're absolutely missing opportunities. So we are looking at both sides. So what we consider is the best solution is one that that looks at both maximizing your revenue and minimizing your fraud. So we're trying to, as I say, trying to thread that needle. We're trying to find that optimal point where we are maintaining control of the fraud, minimizing it, but not at the expense of your overall revenue. So that's kind of our philosophy. And let's go on to and I'll just say that let's go on to the next slide, because I'd probably like to get a little more into what's going on. So how do we do it? Well, we talked about signals before, and I know Jack brought it up. I'm a consumer of signals, and I look at the transactional information that comes in is one type of signal that I can make use of. The fingerprint information, any sort of behavioral information that I can get off the web or the device itself is also another signal. And we also mentioned the idea of a consortium. So that global perspective, I look for signals also that I'm getting that have a good footprint globally. So that also I talked about stability and fidelity, and that having that global footprint gives you that from my perspective too. So it's really we are really pulling this all together. So the decision itself is really tying together all these signals, this third-party data, and other entity information that we might have, like email address, phone numbers and stuff. and we're tying them together, looking at them from a linkage perspective, looking at them from a profile, whether we've seen these particular devices, these customers before, and we're using that within our machine learning environment and the data that we've seen and the signals that we've seen to provide a decision. And so our premier product that we have out there is what we call Payment Guarantee. So what does Payment Guarantee do? Basically, you start over on the left. When a user initiates their checkout, that's when our smart technology starts, and we pull together all these sophisticated patterns, anomalies, characteristics, and these are the signals that help us determine the levels of risks. And then we process these through our decision model, and this consisting, and I mentioned about the hybrid of integrated rules, machine learning, graph-based analysis, and then we output in real time a decision of approval, decline, or in some cases, for example, if you have pending goods or you have physical goods, you could have a pending. So idea is that we would like a little more information before we make a decision, or it gives you an opportunity to actually work farther down in the risk profiles in order to be able to maximize your revenue. So, the one thing we do, given that decision, is we stand behind it. So we indemnify the merchant for.
I think Kevin just left the line, but I have one question in the meantime, Jack. A lot of customers actually have an omni-channel approach, or even like using multiple devices. So maybe I'm in the train right now, using my mobile, using the app of the merchant. Later at home, I'm going to my desktop and going to finalize the purchase on the desktop in the browser. So how's the technology of device supporting this multi-channel, devices, or is this really a tricky point to support the team like from Kevin with a final decision?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, Kevin, we're just taking a question in between here. Since you dropped out, and I'll hand it back off to you after we answer this. But the question is about users that might have multiple devices, and from an omni-channel perspective, especially in retail, right, is usually where I hear omni-channel. I have a retail background. It's vitally important, right, to be able to identify and make a profile and cluster those devices together for that particular customer profile. At Fingerprint, we use that identity to create the visitor IDs for each one of those devices. But we also have an attribute called a linked ID. And we really put it on the responsibility of our customers in order to thread the needle there and create that clustering effect and leverage that linked ID in order to do that link analysis that Kevin had brought up earlier and mentioned, I think, to everyone earlier just a little bit ago. But that's one of the beauties of leveraging a product like Kevin's, is that he will do that link analysis for you and actually make the profile and cluster those groups together so that you don't have to take on that complexity yourself. Absolutely, right, that is a challenge. One of the things that we see and one of the things we've been working on, at least within the marketing attribution space, is actually a thing we call web view linking. Web view linking makes it such that if you have a web view within a mobile device, you're able then to actually link that person or that device maybe to a web browser session on that same device later. So as an example, maybe someone is looking at an ad in Instagram. That Instagram ad opens a web view within that iOS or Android application. That web view we can take as an identifier, and then we can provide enough information and data maybe to link that to, say, a Safari session on that same device or a Chrome session on that same device when maybe they go directly to that e-commerce store and look at those same, I don't know, maybe pair of shoes or shirt that they had seen as an ad, right, previously. So really great for retail, this kind of web view linking attribution. You can leverage our product to do that. Or, from a clustering, right, standpoint, especially for fraud, you can actually leverage Kevin's product and the work that Kevin's team does, I think, within Vesta, and they'll do that link analysis on your behalf.
Mhm. I mean, if Kevin don't mind, I would like to take one question. We have a few minutes left, and would like to take one question, and then we can maybe just wrap it up for Kevin and also for Jack to give some final thoughts. There's one question from Samuel about maybe a different perspective, but more like a fintech world, a sign-up process. But it's maybe an interesting point to Jack. So if a visitor goes on any kind of fintech, signing up for the service and failing a few times, would you take this feedback, Jack, as this device is negative? If someone fails in the KYC process, so would you take this KYC failed process into maybe later with Kevin into a payment use case, or would you separate this that maybe KYC failed doesn't mean that the device is bad?
Right. And I think it depends. It probably depends on every product. It probably depends on every user flow. It depends on each business and what you're actually looking to accomplish. Sometimes what we've seen, the rule sets for these kinds of things can be simple. The rule sets for these kinds of things can actually be very complex. So it totally depends, again, on the use case. The outcomes can even change as well. For some folks and some customers, we see them actually take action automatically and decline that. But we also see some customers put this into a queue and maybe alert a human being, some fraud analyst, maybe to look deeper into this case and investigate what's going on. As a product, as a fingerprint product, again, what we are focused on is bringing the highest level of accuracy and stability, like Kevin had mentioned earlier, to really make sure that we're giving the greatest the signal that we can possibly can. But when it comes to defining these rule sets and when it comes to actioning them, that's where a product like Vesta is going to really be able to help out. And that's where Kevin and team not only have the insights and the intelligence, but their platform also applies an ability for you to do the decisioning as well on top of that intelligence. So I think the answer is yes, but the fingerprinting product really, we strive to be as accurate as we possibly can and as stable as we can as a foundation, like Kevin said, for these other intelligence and insights you can build upon it, and then the rule sets for decisioning that you can, say, plug into a platform like Vesta.
So we almost up to the hour. Maybe Kevin, any kind of final thoughts from your side? Any kind of recommendation? Any low-hanging fruit for the audience to look about false declines?
I think it's really about understanding your business. It's really about having the data to actually do the analysis. If you want to do things yourself, you need to have the data. You need to understand, and it can become fairly complex very quickly. To me, it's how much effort do you want to put into it. The more effort you put in it, the more data you get, the more you can optimize. It is a very dynamic and is an adversarial sort of environment, meaning that you make changes and the bad guys actually make changes too. So it is something that you can't let your guard down. You know what I'm saying? You have to be engaged. So as long as you have the commitment to be engaged, it's possible to do it yourself. But it is a complex environment, and it's getting more complex with a greater degree of payments and data flow and payment.
I think that was a good last view. Okay. Thanks, Kevin.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Was just a second. But thanks, Kevin, for your, let's say, summary and also for joining us today. Jack, any last word from your side before we close the webinar for today?
The only thing I'd say is hopefully folks got a little bit of what they were looking for, and maybe some of the capabilities and answers or education around those capabilities that products like my product Fingerprint and the Vesta product that Kevin supports over there and builds over there. And I think the main thing when it comes to fighting fraud and trying to reduce false declines is education, and hopefully everyone got a little bit of some deeper knowledge, or now they know where to go maybe to continue their journey learning about this. It is a complex topic, like Kevin was saying, and there's a lot of nitty-gritty aspects to it. We just went over the broad strokes, really, and there's a lot of deeper technicals that you can go from here. So again, I think when it comes to the industry, just education and us working together to fight fraud is probably the most important thing, and educating each other on the newest and latest techniques, because like Kevin said, the bad actors out there keep changing their approach all the time.
Thanks, Jack, for this last words. And I think that's also the whole reason why we're doing this webinar, of educating, providing insights, providing perspective, and sharing some best practices to the audience. I just moved back to this slide for the audience so everybody can see the name of the speakers. So in case you want to reach out to Jack or Kevin directly, please do so. Otherwise, if you need more information, just contact us and we will connect you with the right people to get more information. Also, big thank you from my side to the audience. Thank you for being active and asking questions. And stay safe, and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.